Hey, welcome everyone to our closing session for Service Design Virtual Experience. I know we have a few more people that are flowing in from the previous room, but I figure we can go ahead and get started. Um, so it's my pleasure to have with us this afternoon Cox Communications lead service designer and design thinking coach, Michael Allenberg. He's going to walk us through kind of their experience over the last few months as it relates to building a brand new service experience in our new normal in a post-COVID world. So Michael, I'll pass the torch over to you and let you take it away.
Hi, folks. Like Michael said, I'm Michael as well, and this is When Priorities Change, How to Deliver a New Service Experience in a Post-COVID World. So first, a little bit about me. My name is Michael, like we said. I am a lead service designer for Cox. I'm one of several. The way we work at Cox is we have 5 primary customer journeys that cover the breadth of the customer experience, from onboarding and becoming a customer through your life cycle as a customer with us. And I lead the Resolving My Issues journey. So I spend my days working with stakeholders to design customer experiences that benefit our customers that have to call in, and they're usually having a support problem when they do. So that being said, I've been a design professional for over 2 decades. I was a little late to the game of web design, but around 2005, I became a self-taught web designer and started picking up web design clients. And over the next few years, I realized that my passion really wasn't for HTML. It was for the burgeoning discipline of user experience. Spent a number of years working as a user experience professional, consulting. I did work for Coca-Cola Freestyle, if you guys are familiar with the interesting touch multi-flavored dispensers that Coke has. I worked for a small design consultancy in Boston that was phenomenal. I've worked for quite a few other Fortune 500 companies, Toyota, ADP, Home Depot. And a couple of years ago, I landed at Cox, and it's a phenomenal place to work. And I work with a phenomenal team. In fact, we consider ourselves the XD team, the experience design team. And we have 3 pillars: design, research, and measurement. And we're upheld by the design studio, which executes the screen level work after we do the bigger picture service design level work. So with that frame up, let's talk about changing priorities. So this is going to be a twofold conversation. We're going to talk about a project/initiative that I started dabbling in the fall of last year, and then the changing methodologies that we had to use to support its rollout. So in the fall of 2019, I do a lot of work with our field operations team, field services operations team. That's the team that manages technicians that get rolled out to people's houses, both for installations and for repairs and support issues, right? So we had been imagining and talking about the concepts of peer-to-peer technician technical support. So imagine having some of our more seasoned senior technicians spend a little bit of their time, instead of out in the field, sitting virtually in a virtual support center. And then when a junior tech or a tech that's never encountered a specific problem before hits that problem, he has the ability to contact this senior tech using a virtual tool. We weren't sure if it was going to be FaceTime or a Google Duo. We ended up settling on a technology called Help Lightning, which allows for that same video interaction, but provides an augmented reality layer as well. Now, again, this was something we were only imagining in a peer-to-peer format in the beginning. The concept was we would take it through pilot phases, probably several, and if it played out the way we were hoping, we would eventually roll it out to be a customer-facing tool. We didn't think that would happen before 2021 at least. Well, in came COVID in early March, and literally the call went out to send us home and tell us all to work from home somewhere around March 11th or 12th. I don't remember the exact date, but literally by March 26th, we were piloting this concept, customer facing. completely skipped over everything we're planning to do because, well, we couldn't cross the threshold anymore. That's what we call when we send a technician over the door or through the front door and into your house. And so the minute those policies were put in place during the beginnings of the COVID outbreak, we had to fast track the implementation of some way to help provide our customers. Not the idea at first wasn't so much around technical support as it was around installation support, right? Because people are constantly calling and wanting new service. And if we can't send a technician to your house to install new service, what could we do? Well, in doing so, we also had to figure out, what does it look like to have a remote design and delivery team? You know, no longer co-located, at home, working remotely. What would we do and how would we meet those needs? So the ways before, pre-COVID, we would all gather maskless in confined conference rooms, and we would work through many types of collaborative design workshops. At Cox, we were quite fond of the Jake Knapp design sprint methodology. We also like more traditional design thinking workshops, or even smaller little mini workshops broken up over a series of days. But, when you're working diligently for 6 to 8 hours a day over several days, going through numerous design thinking activities with the goal or the line of sight on a pretty solid outcome at the end of that week, or at least some pretty solid generated concepts at the end of the week, how do you translate that into a remote design and delivery model? I mean, when you stop to think about it, it's hard enough to get a large group of people in a conference room for multiple, like I said, 6 to 8 hours, multiple times in a single week. It takes quite a bit of a scheduling commitment. It worked for us because a lot of our stakeholders would come in from our markets, such as Phoenix or California or up in the Northeast. So they would literally carve that time out and fly to our headquarters here in Atlanta, Georgia. And, we would all have a kind of predefined rules of engagement going in, right? And we've been working this way for a number of years. So quite a few of them were familiar with that. But moving forward, how exactly do you design a virtual customer experience virtually? Well, like I said, conference rooms had to give way to remote sessions. So the first thing we had to figure out is, how do we structure these remote sessions? Obviously, design sprint methodology doesn't work when you're trying to get people to do something remote. It's very difficult to get people to commit to more than a 2-hour, 120-minute virtual session in a single day. The only way we've had success in getting more than a 2-hour session in a day is to do a 2-hour chunk in the morning, give them 3 or 4 hours of their day back in the middle of the day, and try to end with another hour, hour and a half in the afternoon. Personally, I've found I have the most luck staggering these types of sessions over the course of several weeks. So if there isn't a business immediacy, a need to get this done all in a week or in a week and a half, it really reduces the stress of the stakeholders if you can block out a couple hours the same day every week for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks until you've reached your goals. And in doing so, think about the way you schedule your activities, right? So for our activities, all of us like whiteboards. We've been doing that for a long time, but what are you going to do if it's virtual? Well, we had already been dabbling in a virtual tool called Mural. Not sure if you guys know it. It's a virtual whiteboarding collaborative tool. It allows for creation of sticky notes. It allows for freehand drawing. It allows for creations of canvases and models. If you look in the background of the slide I'm showing you now, you see examples of blueprinting work that I've been doing recently for the company. So Mural is a very flexible tool. And the thing with Mural is you're not just leading the session. So that's a little bit different in the way we would run collaborative design sessions in a conference room, because even though everyone's collaborating on activities, there's one or maybe two facilitators leading everything by placing it on the whiteboards, drawing it out as you go, organizing the session so that it makes sense and it flows and that the artifacts make sense. Mural's a little different. It takes a little bit of planning. It takes a little bit of creation of templates. At Cox, we partner with the Luma Institute, which is a design thinking institute that has a ton of templates and materials, and they actually are integrated into Mural. So it's a great flow. So unfortunately, not one for blueprinting. We created that one on our own, but for a lot of activities, a lot of design thinking activities, you can just grab and import a template and open it up. You don't have to start everything from scratch. So that's been super, super helpful. And like I said, sketching and sticky notes, which are the foundation of a traditional design thinking workshop, had to become virtual. So icons and virtual sticky notes. Mural is also integrated with the Noun project, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. It's a really robust icon aggregator, for lack of a better term, icon search engine. And it's directly integrated into Mural, and also a Google search for Google Images is directly integrated into Mural as well. So you can find a ton of open, free imagery that Google aggregates on a regular basis. So that being said, now that you have the concepts in place, how do you get them to do it? How do you train them on the tool? It's a little bit different when you get a whole bunch of people into a conference room for the first time, because almost all stakeholders that have been in business for a while are used to some form of whiteboard iteration, right? And as much as they don't like to do it, you put some white paper and some Sharpies in front of them, and they'll draw for you in ideation sessions like crazy eights if you give them the proper motivation of coffee and maybe some muffins or something. Well, Mural's a little different. It's got a learning curve. So how do you surmount that learning curve? Well, my wonderful peers and colleagues came up with a Mural onboarding template. It's broken down into 7 steps, and we've been incredibly successful every time we are going to onboard a new group of stakeholders for a large initiative. We'll schedule before the project kickoff or as part of the project kickoff, depending on time, 40 to 45 minutes to walk them through a Mural onboarding session. And so what does that look like? Well, it starts with intros. Intros are super important. I mean, I would stand up and do a 5 to 10 minute introduction at the beginning of every session I ever did. So you want to lay your Mural board out in a way that it flows like that. You put your information in, you put a face to the name, you tie it together as much as possible by explaining what you're trying to do. And it's also very helpful at the beginning of every mural session to not just title your session and drop it at the top of your mural board, but also to give a few bullet points about what the goals are, right? Sure, you had a kickoff session. Sure, you reviewed all that to begin with, but there's no harm done in leaving it there for reference sake. So this one is very important for Mural and really not even that important at all. So maybe when you're in a conference room and you're giving the laptops down, phone calls in the hallway instructions that we all do, you replace that with navigation skills, because Mural can be a little confusing. So one of the first things I like to tell people is, once they come in, and they come in as these anonymous animals, and little icons represented by anonymous animals, because only our actual experienced design team and immediate collaborators have licenses. So we come in with our names, but the others come in that way. So the quickest thing to do, there's a summon function where I can summon everybody that's wandered onto this huge mural board. And they can be rather large because, like I said, you want to set them up in advance. And as we saw on this slide, that's zoomed out quite large. If you look down into the right corner, kind of the middle of this slide, at the right corner of that mural, you'll see the whole navigation area, that there are like 7 or 8 of these little areas all on one large mural board. So when you drop people in there, man, it can be incredibly confusing. They're in this tool for the first time, no idea where they're at. So like I said, best practice is to summon everybody to you, and then give them a quick heads up of how to move around. So there's a really cool function that you can pop out on the right side of a board that is an outline. And if you set your board up in numbered sections like we did here, then you can create a linkage between each numbered section and the outline. So if people get lost, they can quickly jump to a numbered section. And then that's good because you can set up your activities in the numerical order that you would do them. Also, you need to orient them to the left side of the mural tool where they have specific access to sticky notes and the aforementioned icons and imagery and templates and the ability to upload items and so on and so forth. You also want to inform them about the mural map. So then, like I said, stickies is kind of the core of everything you do, whether it's blueprinting in a in-person workshop on a whiteboard or doing something similar using mural. Sticky notes are really the crux of this tool. Very easy to use. You can either pop out the sticky panel right here and teach them how to drag and drop different colors and different sizes, or you can show them it's just as easy to double click on the canvas and open up open up a sticky. Again, the icons and images. This is interesting. We pivoted to using this because it's really difficult for people that aren't used to drawing with a mouse or a Wacom tablet to teach them how to freehand draw in a tool such as this. So after some trial and error over the summer, we realized that even for something as small as a sticky, it's much more illustrative if they drop an icon. It can be a simple black and white icon that's sourced out of, like I said, the Noun Project aggregator right here. And they get more comfortable telling a story using these icons because it's easier to do that than it is to draw for a lot of people. And in fact, I've even used this, and it's not part of the example I'm going to show you today, but I've even used icons to replace traditional Crazy Eights drawing exercises, and it's been wildly successful. So think outside the box, right? And even for sticky notes, when you're getting into concept, if you're putting concepts on stickies, sometimes it's easier to do a couple words and an icon and then have a conversation around that, right? So the last couple sections when you're onboarding is there's a built-in voting capability, which is super cool. You can give them a number of votes, you can time the session, and you can click on it. Very similar to how we used to dot vote on index cards or stickies back in the old day, right? Then I always try to give them a couple of the advanced shortcuts. So there's a couple keyboard commands that just make it super easy to navigate yourself around. And then, like every good design exercise, you should always finish with a small retrospective. We're really fond of the rose, thorn, bud series or idea of retrospective. So we ask them to drop in what we call roses, which are things that went really well. We asked them to tell us the thorns, things that weren't so great and could be improved upon. And then we asked for buds, which are things that could be developed into better practice or better ideas going forward. So how did we apply these techniques to reimagine a service experience? So you remember me telling you guys about the virtual technician piece? So now we're going to talk about what we did for virtual tech. So the first thing we did was we identified all of the stakeholders using stakeholder mapping. We thought we knew who we were dealing with, but it became a much broader project than we expected because, not just field operations and field operations leadership, but also care, which is the frontline group of agents that answer phone calls when people call in with problems, and comm center, which is the routing agents that facilitate the linkage between the care folks and what eventually becomes a field ops truck roll when we schedule and send a truck to your house. Also, people from product and process, technology, digital marketing and sales, and of course, our experience design team. So then we got together and we did a session around experience mapping. So the goal with experience mapping was we have existing scenarios in place. Well, we actually use detailed process mapping at Cox. So we have a whole process team that builds things out using a tool called iGraphics. Those detailed process maps are wonderful for finding detailed linkages with technology and even laddering back up to experience, but they're a little too much for a collaborative session like this. So what I did is I brought in the people that we needed to map the scenario at a higher customer focused scenario perspective, focusing on more of touch point moments, not moments as we define moment architecture in our journeys, but moments that step through both the steps the customer and our front and backstage employees would be making during the process. And then what we did is we hit a moment where we would split each of our scenarios into the existing physical scenario as it existed today and what we thought a virtual support scenario could look like. And then once we had our scenarios mapped into place, we did rapid ideation sessions using sticky notes, kind of lining them up underneath each moment. So think of this as a very down and dirty way to blueprint in under 30 minutes, right? We voted on those, and the concepts that got the most votes were advanced forward. And I wanted to separate this section out because one of the things that I had an aha moment on early on, and I think some of my colleagues did too, is it really made sense to move some tasks offline for efficiency. So a good example of this is if you're running a traditional design sprint and you get to day 4, which is prototyping, right? It's hard to keep stakeholder engagement because you've got a support designer and yourself and maybe some support tasks assigned to stakeholders like content sourcing or image sourcing as you're working to create a prototype together or working to create what this new process looks like together. But it's not easy at all to keep them engaged doing that online. So we made a decision early on that once we had reached voted upon prioritized concepts, we would take those offline and develop them. And the way we chose to move forward and develop them was, well, first thing I did is I cleaned up and format mapped the scenarios so that they look a little bit more like a process map. They're a little easier to read than what we threw down on the mural. The outlined blue area at the bottom shows those activities that move strictly to the virtual support center. Then at Cox, we're very fond of a technique called stories from the future. Stories from the future is a way of illustrating a customer journey using these future state concepts and process and policies that we surface during design sessions and putting them in a storyboarded format. Now, this is where it got super interesting. Generally, the way we've done this over the past several years is we would either use photography, where we would literally photograph internal members of the Cox group as actors, including customers, field technicians, care agents, however we chose to express this. Or we would have one of our wonderful design studio members who's very proficient in illustration to do us a traditionally illustrated storyboard. Well, that just really wasn't an option in a COVID world, right? Our design studio members are swamped and photography, co-located photography is a thing of the past for right now. So we thought, why not? Let's try doing icons and see if we could tell the story with icons. And it was wildly successful. So then after the icons, we are in the process right now of moving forward with concept testing these stories from the future in front of actual field service employees. We have several different ones. We had numerous concepts that came out of the workshop. It was very, very successful. And what we're working towards doing is incrementally improving the virtual tech support experience and opening up new use cases moving forward as we help field services realize their North Star vision for all of this. So out with the old for the time being and in with the new. And this, up at the top, you can see a quick screenshot example of what the augmented reality communications tool that we have put in place looks like. So with that being said, thank you. And I ran a little long, so I was hoping to turn my screen share off and we could do a few questions.
Well, Beverly's come through and with a question around Will you share your mural template for service blueprinting?
Will I share my mural template for service blueprinting? Sure, I'm happy to. I wasn't prepared to share it right now, but if you bear with me just a second, I can exit out of my presentation. And there we go, and show, and see if I can pull one up real quick. Anybody else have any comments or questions?
And you all can do whatever is easiest. You can raise your hand in the Zoom, and we can promote you to ask your question live. Or you're also welcome to just drop it in the chat, either in on the session landing page or in Zoom.
Okay. So I'm just going to pull this over here really quick and kind of walk you through the way we set it up. Where's my Zoom link to share again? Let's see. Okay. If everyone can see, so we set it up as a traditional blueprint. At Cox, since we are journey based, we have built out an extensive moment architecture for each journey. And I mean, they're slightly fluid, especially for the resolving my issues journey, because it's never a linear path like an onboarding installation journey would be. So basically the way we set up the blueprint is we'll write a scenario for each use case. And then we'll document the moments across the top, breaking the scenario into the steps for each moment. And notice that sometimes as we're going through this exercise, we'll realize that our scenario skips some of our traditional moment steps. So then we'll come into here, and what we'll do is each column gets a step number to correspond with the first of these, so they don't ladder up as well as the columns underneath. But then we build a row for customer actions, a row for customer touch points, front stage actions, which are our front stage employees, such as field service technicians coming to your house, care agents, sales agents, anyone you're talking to directly. Backstage actions, which are things that our backstage employees are doing, or automated actions that we already have in place that are driving our scenario. Policies, process, technology, and I like to add two at the bottom that I have my project manager in charge of. That would be documenting new capabilities if they get surfaced and or taking notes. Now, when we go through, I like to use white stickies. If you'll notice, some of the white stickies have a black outline. That is the way that we denote it is a future state item. So it could be a future state employee action. It could be a future state policy. It could be a future state process. In a couple of these, you'll notice that we also have gray stickies, and the gray stickies are denoted because Cox is broken up into a residential business and Cox business, which are our small business to corporation size customers. And sometimes the way we do things for Cox business varies from the way we do things for Cox residential. So in trying to be able to combine that into one blueprint, we call it out with a slightly different colored sticky. So unfortunately, I can't send you guys a copy of that I just shared, because that is proprietary. We just built it out a couple weeks ago, and it's things that we're working over the next couple weeks. But it's really easy to go into Mural and just drop your rows. Then remember, this is the one key thing I forgot to tell you. So Becky, it's a good thing you brought, or Beverly, excuse me, it's a good thing you brought this up, because you have the ability to lock items onto the Mural canvas by right clicking or control clicking if you're on a Mac. If you need to group each, like highlight group each row and then lock it onto the canvas as you build it before you have people drop stickies on it. And then once you've done that, you basically have a template. So it really becomes just matching the traditional service blueprinting row-based actions of front stage and backstage to whatever scenario style architecture you'd like to use.
One other question that's come through here, Michael, is around kind of the business's reaction to using Mural. Obviously, a lot of people are using Mural now that certainly weren't ever before. What would you say as generally like has been the reaction across Cox in terms of the adoption of Mural?
So it's been phenomenal and sweeping adoption. And the interesting thing is a lot of us, myself included, we're incredibly apprehensive to give up our, facilitation powers of being in person and having that warmth. But to be quite honest with you, my engagement and participation rates are through the roof compared to an in-person design session. I mean, in-person design sessions, people are distracted. Maybe it's I don't know they're distracted now because I can't see them if they have to quickly take a call because I'm in the middle of a session. But for the most part, especially using icons and the sticky notes, that participation is through the roof. Like before, they might write on sticky notes. It might be a co-facilitator capturing their thoughts on sticky notes for me. I'm the one arranging them. I'm the one affinitizing them a lot of the times. Now they're all in there jumping in, doing everything. And they love the icons. That's increased their willingness to draw like you would not believe. So
That's too funny. Was there any like, I guess, sort of like moments of truth for adoption, or was it just pretty organic and like across the organization? Any tips for adoption?
it was fairly organic. We started using it on, I believe it was our managing journey, because the senior leaders on that journey are located in California. And it was very difficult for them to fly in anytime they wanted to use a session. So the director of our design studio started socializing Mural, and she had some great success with it. And in doing so, she gave each of the leads an enterprise license for it. And so then we started dipping our toes in the water. But then the minute we were all work from home, there really wasn't an option, right? We had to do the work. We had to get it done. And in all honesty, I find myself enjoying it equally, if not as much, because I like the fact that my artifacts are on a permanent mural board and they're not just photographs in my iPhoto library that I have to go back and refer to. I can get to this board at any time. I can modify it, adjust it. We can go back and do things. When you're doing this kind of stuff in conference rooms, at the end of the week or at the end of the session, you got to take your photos, wipe it all down for the next person. So that was also a big driver to adoption for the team.
Makes sense. Any other questions from folks? I haven't seen anything else come through on the other two chats, but right. Thank you so much, Michael. It's really fantastic. Appreciate you sharing all your learnings, and it was a great presentation.
Thank you, folks, very, very much. And thank you for having me, Michael. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, yeah.